The European Union finds itself at a fork in the road in a world characterized by altered global dynamics and new powers. The EU, which was once solely concerned with economic unity, has steadily transformed into a sophisticated political body with aspirations to dominate the world. We dig into the worlds of international politics, diplomacy, and economics to investigate if the EU has the ability to develop into a superpower. Let's get started. How the EU works. The European Union, EU, is a distinct supranational organization that was established on the tenets of cooperation and shared sovereignty. The 27-member EU works cooperatively to achieve its goals through its primary institutions. As the executive authority, the European Commission makes legislative recommendations and enforces them, ensuring that EU law is applied consistently. The European Parliament, which is directly elected by the general public and exerts democratic scrutiny, gives the decision-making process legitimacy. The European Union Council participates in legislative deliberations and decisions on behalf of member states. A number of treaties outlining the EU's goals, structure, and operations serve as the framework for its governance. The movement of people, capital, products, and services inside the single market's boundaries is made easier and promotes economic integration. By allowing passport-free travel between the majority of member states, the Schengen Agreement strengthens this integration even more. Within the EU, decisions are frequently made after lengthy negotiations and consensus building. While member states still retain some national sovereignty, they cooperate to create policies, solve problems, and strive towards common objectives. The EU's dedication to promoting peace, stability, and prosperity among its member states is highlighted by the innovative combination of supranational governance and intergovernmental cooperation that it has developed. Application process. The road to EU membership has been painstakingly planned out in order to guarantee respect for the Union's principles and standards. The Copenhagen criteria, which include conditions in politics, economics, and law, must be met by prospective member nations. Stable institutions that uphold democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and minority protection are among these requirements. A formal request to join the EU triggers the application procedure, which is then followed by an evaluation by the European Commission. Negotiations to bring national policies and legislation into line with EU standards are launched if the Commission finds the candidate eligible. This approach, which aims to harmonize laws and practices, spans a wide range of industries, from energy to agriculture. Candidate nations are required to implement extensive reforms in order to comply with EU standards. In order to do this, governance structures must be changed, market competitiveness must be improved, and the large collection of EU laws and regulations known as the acquis communautaire must be embraced. The EU offers both financial and technical support during the negotiation process to help with the adaptation process. Ratification by the candidate nation and the current member states marks the end of the process and results in accession. This represents not only a territorial expansion for the EU, but also a test of its internal unity. While the application process demonstrates the EU's allure, it also highlights the difficulties in striking a balance between its unity and the various demands of potential members. Candidate states. Numerous prospective states from all over Europe have been attracted by the European Union's attractiveness as a bulwark of stability and prosperity. In search of economic advantages and long-term political stability, the Western Balkan countries, which include countries like Serbia and Montenegro, eagerly work towards integration. Their goals coincide with the purpose of the EU, which is to widen its zone of peace and cooperation. But Turkey's candidature comes with its own set of difficulties. Despite its proximity to Europe geographically and culturally, worries about its democratic practices and record on human rights have hampered its membership process. The tricky balancing act between advancing common principles and engaging in practical diplomacy is shown by the EU's attitude in negotiations with Turkey. The potential expansion of the EU to include these candidate nations has the potential to promote regional harmony, economic progress, and security. However, the path to membership is a complicated and nuanced one that requires not only reforms in the candidate nations, but also the EU's capacity to handle the various interests of its member states. EU foreign policy. The difficult balancing act between the interests of the European Union as a whole and those of its various member states is its foreign policy. The EU attempts to project its influence globally through diplomacy, conflict resolution, and cooperation, guided by the Common Foreign and Security Policy, CFSP. The Lisbon Treaty strengthened the EU's position by enabling it to conduct a more determined and well-thought-out foreign policy. It supports multilateralism and emphasizes working with other nations and the UN to handle global issues including terrorism, migration, and climate change. The basis of EU diplomacy is the use of economic incentives, political involvement, and soft power. The Iran nuclear accord is a prime example of the EU's diplomatic skill, showing how it was able to bring together disparate parties to reach a significant agreement. However, the EU experiences internal disagreements among its constituent nations on significant foreign policy matters, which hinders its ability to take a cohesive position. The EU's foreign policy demonstrates its dedication to safeguarding international standards and peace, while attempting to strike a balance between respecting national sovereignty and promoting shared values. The EU's desire to rise to superpower status depends on its capacity to negotiate these complexities, effectively use its diplomatic assets, and develop a compelling story that resonates in the international arena. Conflicts. On its path to becoming a superpower, the European Union faces both possibilities and challenges within the complex web of global geopolitics. As it supported Ukraine's sovereignty against Russian aggression, the Ukrainian crisis offered the EU a platform to demonstrate its potential as a mediator and stabilizer. This highlighted the difficulty of taking a single position. Nevertheless, as member states had different opinions. Internal strife, represented by Brexit, which exposed the challenges of balancing disparate national interests, puts the EU's aspirations to the test. Furthermore, international crises like the Syrian conflict have reaffirmed the EU's role as a provider of humanitarian aid and diplomatic efforts, while highlighting its limitations in exercising direct influence. Managing conflicts, whether they are internal to the EU or external, continues to be a major conundrum as it tries to put its objectives into practice. In the complicated geopolitical environment of the modern era, the EU's ability to transform from a union of nations into a coherent superpower will depend on how skillfully it overcomes these obstacles. The EU's response to conflicts also encompasses long-term conflict prevention and peace-building in addition to short-term crisis management. The EU's involvement in the Western Balkans, where long-standing resentments are still present, demonstrates its dedication to promoting peace and stability. However, the complex web of racial conflicts and conflicting national histories frequently slows down progress. Furthermore, the EU struggles to strike a balance between its values-based strategy and practical realpolitik, particularly when dealing with countries whose strategic interests and concerns about human rights collide. The EU's interactions with nations like Turkey, whose membership aspirations mix with worries about democratic relapse and human rights abuses, clearly demonstrate this dynamic. In essence, the EU's pursuit of superpower status involves balancing its principles with the intricacies of world politics. The EU's capacity to promote unity and stability while addressing the complex challenges of our day will be the key to determining whether it has successfully transitioned into a truly contemporary superpower. This ability will be put to the test as it negotiates the spheres of war, diplomacy, and consensus building. The journey will be characterized by difficult choices, fortitude, and an unwavering dedication to creating a society where conflict gives way to collaboration and prosperity. Diplomacy. The practice of diplomacy is crucial to the European Union's, EU, aspiration for superpower status. The EU aims to negotiate the complex web of international relations by combining soft power tactics, financial incentives, and multilateral participation. The EU's strategy for dispute resolution, negotiation, and international influence is built on diplomacy. The European Union, EU, seeks to show a single face in addressing global concerns through its Common Foreign and Security Policy, CFSP. It stands out as a unique force on the international stage due to its emphasis on diplomatic discussion and consensus building. The discussions over the Iran nuclear deal serve as a strong illustration of the EU's diplomatic skills. The EU was instrumental in supporting the negotiations that resulted in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action by working with major world powers. This demonstrated the EU's capacity to develop diplomatic ties, strengthen security, and promote stability around the world. Additionally, the EU uses its economic might as a diplomatic weapon. Its ability to negotiate partnerships, form alliances, and advance international norms is an indication of its diplomacy-focused strategy. Due to its economic clout, the EU has a stronger voice in international affairs and can influence debates on everything from climate change to human rights. The diplomatic journey of the EU is not without difficulties, though. Its capacity to take a unified position can occasionally be hampered by the need to balance the various interests of its member states. Despite these challenges, the EU continues to uphold the fundamentals of diplomacy, acting as a peacemaker, partner, and supporter of stability in the contemporary world. The European Union's diplomatic efforts essentially represent its desire to become a world superpower. The EU continues to define itself as a force to be reckoned with on the global stage through skillful negotiation, the building of bridges, and consensus development. Economy. The economy of the European Union is a pillar of its aspirations to become a superpower. The EU is home to the second-largest economy in the world, thanks to its single market and use of the euro as its shared currency. It has significant influence in international politics thanks to its strong economy. Because internal trade restrictions are removed by the single market, member states can freely move people, capital, products, and services among themselves. This integration promotes economic expansion, spurs innovation, and heightens competition. The adoption of the euro by 19 of the 27 member states strengthens the EU's economic weight by fostering stability and facilitating international trade. The EU can negotiate trade accords from a position of leverage thanks to its economic power. Its capacity to establish and uphold trade regulations serves the interests of both its members and partners on every continent. The EU's economic aspirations are highlighted by its trade negotiations with nations like Canada and Japan, as well as the current discussions with the United Kingdom following Brexit. However, member state economic disparities continue to be a problem. While the EU aims for cohesiveness, tensions arise due to the disparities in national economy and degrees of development. While northern nations like Germany and the Netherlands prosper, southern European nations like Greece and Italy struggle with debt and unemployment. These differences put the EU's unity to the test and cast doubt on its capacity to exercise consistent economic influence. The EU's economic might offers a strong platform for involvement and influence as it strives to become a superpower. The EU has the ability to dominate international affairs, as seen by its influence over trade agreements, banking laws, and global economic policy. While the EU competes for a prominent position on the international scene, fixing internal economic imbalances will be essential for its ability to present a unified and strong front. The European Union aspires to establish itself as a contemporary superpower in the vast tapestry of world affairs. The EU's path to international prominence is fraught with difficulties as it negotiates the complexity of government, diplomacy, and economics. In addition to internal coherence and effective procedures, the path to superpower status calls for dynamic adaptability to a constantly shifting external environment. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends.